Factoring out a monomial from a polynomial. We're going to factor the following two expressions completely, okay? Notice there is an operation in between, and so when we factor this out, we're going to take advantage of the distributive property. The first step is to find the greatest common factor, okay, of the two terms. Notice the first term is here, the second term is here. Usually the numbers are the most difficult. So why don't we find the GCF of 26 and 13? Well, 26 is 2 times 13, and those are prime. And then 13, well, we could write the prime number 13. So what do those two numbers have in common? They just have 13. Now the letters are a little bit easier. Notice, if you had to compare u squared and u to the ninth, there's u squared in common. And if you had w to the seventh and w to the sixth, then you have w to the sixth in common. Okay, so we have this in common, we have this in common, and we have what? We have this in common. So the GCF is really what? The GCF of the two terms is 13u squared w to the sixth power. Notice they don't have any x's in common. So let's rewrite this expression. 13u squared w to the sixth, and then we're going to use the distributive property. So this times something here has to get me 26u squared y to the seventh. So the only thing left is a w. Minus, well, we already have a 13. So we're at this step right here. If we're going to use the distributive property, it'll be 13u squared w to the 6 multiplied through this space here. Has to get you what? 13u to the ninth, w to the 6th, and x to the 8th. So what do we have? What do we have left? What do we need? We need u to the 7th. We got our w's taken care of, so now we just have x to the 8th. And there you go. Notice you are really using the distributive property. So how many factors do we have here? We actually have 4 factors. So you can see, well, at least 4 factors. 13 is a factor. U squared is another factor. W to the 6 is another factor. And then the last factor is what? The last factor is w minus u to the 7th, x to the 8th. Okay, so there's really 4 factors here. So that's what we mean by factor completely. You should be able to count your factors. You should be able to at least see 4 factors here. Or I should say, you should be able to see at least 4 factors here. Okay, let's try the next one. Next one here. What does 56 and 16 have in common? We need the GCF of these two terms. So 56, remember, is 7 times 8, or 8 times 7. So there's 8, and then there's 7. How about 16? 16 is just 4 times 4, which is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So they have 2 times 2 times 2 in common. They have 2 to the third in common. So 2 to the third is 8. How many x's do they have in common? They have x squared. How many y's do they have in common? They have y to the 5th in common. And then they do not have any z's in common. So now we're ready to use the distributive property. So we write parentheses. Okay, and then once again, I'm going to check by multiplying. In other words, 8x squared times y to the 5th times blank has to get me what? Has to get me 56x squared y to the 6th. Okay, so we're going to need a 7. And then we need a y. And that would do it. Plus, what else? 2, obviously. Because 8 times 2 gets you what? 16. And then what else do we need? We need x to the 7th. Okay. We got our y's taken care of, and we also need z to the 3rd. And that's it. So once again, you should be able to count how many factors you have. So here's a factor. 8 is a factor. X squared is another factor. Y to the 5th is another factor. And then once again, this is another factor. So there you should be able to see at least 4 factors. Let's circle that. Now, if you're ever unsure, what you could do is just check. And often, what we mean by that is check by multiplying. So if you wanted to, you could check. You could say 8x squared y to the 5th. In fact, that's exactly what you were doing during this factoring process. You were actually checking. And so a lot of times we call this trial and checking. So why don't we check by distributing? So distribute here and distribute here, and let's see what we get. We get 56 x squared y to the 6th plus 16 x to the 9th y to the 5th z to the 3rd. Does that check? Oh yes, it does. That's in fact what we started with. Okay, and so awesome. So practice a lot of these to build yourself some confidence. And before you know it, you're getting the hang of these greatest common factors and the distributive property.